couple of years ago, through all the recruiting and all that stuff, I did a tally. I saw one of these things on Facebook where it said, hey, how many states have you been to? Mark off the states you've been to, whatever, So I'm like, hey, I'm going to look at this. I think I've been to a pretty good amount of states. So I started counting them, and I figured out I had been to 43 states. Okay. And the 50, and at the time I was around 46, 47 years old. Okay. So I started this, it was kind of a bucket list deal. And I started this plan, and it was going to be the 50 by 50 tour. Okay. So I had 7 states I had left to get to, and they were all kind of up in the northwestern part of the country. So my 49th summer, so I'm 49 years old, a couple of years ago. It was the summer of 2017, I believe, whatever. Yeah, somewhere right around there, 2017. So my son and I, Trey, our oldest son, we get on a plane and we fly to North Dakota. So that's where we're going to start the trip. And that was one of the states I had not been to. Okay, now I'd been to South Dakota because I'd been there to recruit a couple of young men the year prior, or a couple of years prior, but I'd never been in North Dakota. So we started in North Dakota, wound up driving down through South Dakota because we'd never been to the western part of the state, but we went to like the Badlands. We did a helicopter tour of the Badlands. We went and saw Mount Rushmore, the whole deal. Then we stayed in South Dakota one night. Then we drove up through Wyoming. So I'd never been to Wyoming. So it was North Dakota. We went to Wyoming. Okay. We went to Yellowstone, and we went to the Grand Tetons and that whole deal, and Jackson Hole. Then we went down into Utah. Okay. Hadn't been to Utah. We spent 2 days in Utah, went to a couple of state parks, the Arches and Canyonland State Park. And that was really cool. And then the next day we got up and drove to Idaho. So we stayed one night in Boise, and I called my buddy Brian Harson over at Boise State and went over and got a tour of the blue turf and all that stuff. Then we get up the next day and we drove over to Portland. And so we're in Oregon. Well, and that's where Bailey, our daughter, met us in Oregon. And then we spent the night there, got up, drove to Seattle. So we're in Washington. So that was the 6th state. Spent a day in Seattle. Went to Space Needle and Pike's Market and all that stuff. And then the next day we flew to Alaska, and that was my 50th state. And we spent 2 days in Alaska and had an unbelievable trip. And the great part about it, I got to check off all the states and all that stuff. And that's pretty cool, to be able to say you did that. But the best part about it was just, that I think it was 11 days. Okay. Just being with my kids.
Yeah. Coach, and you hear stories, and that's why I think it's so important. I love it because so many fathers in understanding just how important that is to your kids. Because you talk about things your kids will never forget, stories that y'all shared along those journeys. Wow.
Yeah. Well, one of the coolest things was we had the best bacon that we've ever put in our mouths. in this little hole in the wall coffee shop on the side of the road in between Anchorage, Alaska and Seward, Alaska. There was this little place that was called Froth and Forage, and it was in like a double wide trailer. And we stopped in there to get a cup of coffee. And I looked at the menu, and it said they had house cured, house smoked, local honey bacon. And I was like, you got to give me an order of that bacon. And so the guy, they make the bacon, they bring it out, and we started eating it. We were like, it was like life-changing bacon, so that was like one of the stories we had from that trip. So,
and I'm sure it's a story you guys probably still talk about to this day, right?
I wish I could get that bacon by mail order. I mean, that guy had it down to a science,
Dude. And I mean, here's the bottom line. If you don't like bacon, I'm not sure I can be friends with a guy who doesn't like bacon. I mean, if you look at me, I've had my share of bacon, right?
I'm going to agree with you 100% on that. It's hard to trust somebody that doesn't like bacon.